Okay, right. So yesterday, where we stopped, we just stopped at the option explicit, right? I told about option explicit. Okay. So what exactly meant by option explicit is, whenever generally in VB script, a declaration of variable is not a mandatory, right? So you can still use the variables without doing any declaration before. Uh, it's also an advantage, but more than advantage, it's disadvantage. Okay, impact is more than advantage here. Impact of disadvantage. The disadvantage is, so when you are writing huge lines of code and when you use a lot of variables and all, then there are chances or there are situations that we may misspell the variable one or other place. Okay, so it's not intentionally, but so unintentionally, when the variable names are big and all, one of the character may be misspelled or may be missed out, or instead of typing one character you may type another character. Quite common things those are. Okay, we do the mistakes like this. But when you do misspell like this in a variable, then VB script will not tell you that, the script will not tell you how misspelled a variable, or you are using this variable without doing any declaration or initiation. So in such cases, what VB script thinks is, okay, instead of considering that as a misspelled variable, it will consider that as a new variable. Okay, so user is using a new variable here. Let me allocate some memory for this and keep the empty value. By default, an empty value will be placed. So since, okay, you have not given any value for that variable earlier, because that's new here, then the empty value will be there in that variable by default, and empty value will be passed to the application or maybe to your logic, or wherever you have used that. So this leads to a lot of confusion, and this leads to failure of the programs always. Okay, quite common. This is very common thing that people do. Okay, even though people are expertise, but still this kind of things happen. So in such cases, what you need to do is, so even though the declaration of variable is not a mandatory, even the variable declaration is not a mandatory, but still I need to force my VB script saying that, okay, if any user tries to use a variable and if the variable is not declared earlier, then don't allow him to use, or don't allow that user to use that variable. Throw the error saying that the variable is being used and not declared earlier. Okay, so that's what the option explicit does exactly. It will force the user, whoever writing the script or whoever executing the script, so it will force the user to declare the variable before they use it. Okay, so that is the definition for option explicit exactly. Then yesterday we have written option explicit, right? If you remember, the option explicit was written, and this was the script that we have written, right? If you look at this, the option explicit was written at the very beginning of the code. So you can also say keep some blank lines before, no problem. Those blank lines are considered invalid, that means will be ignored during the execution. So this option explicit should be placed at very first line of valid code in the program. At very first line of, what I mean here is, before option explicit, there should be no statement or no method, no code, whatever the line that you write. No statement should be executed. Option explicit should be the first statement which has to be executed. Got what I am saying here? Then before option explicit, if you write a statement or if you write a method, then if that method is executed, then VB script cannot understand option explicit. Remember. Okay? So no statement should be executed. That means no valid statement or no valid line of code should be placed before option explicit. Okay, let me do one thing. I'm using something called, so I'm just using a variable here. Or I'll just use a message box. Message box sum. So message box is a function which we have in the VB script. We saw that yesterday. We saw that message box yesterday. Just whatever the text that you have given, the text will be appear to us during execution. Now see what happens. Now before option explicit, I have placed a line of code which is valid and which will be executed. Then now it's here, right? This is the one. Then what it says here, line number 4, it says expected statement. That means what's happening is expected statement comes when you have made any syntax error in your program, and when the script is not able to understand the statement that what you have written, then in both the cases you will get this kind of error, a syntax error or a statement which you have written is not understandable by the program. So in this case, that option explicit is not understandable by VB script. That's the reason it's throwing the error. Then now what I will do is I will comment out this. I'll come back to this comments in some time later in today's session only. Okay. So generally comments mean for whenever you want to provide the information about the program that what you have written, or whenever you have to whenever you want to make your script understandable, how your script will be understandable, you have to provide the sufficient information. Okay, why this block of code is written, or why the variables have been declared, or why option explicit has been written, or some information for every new statement that you write, or every block of code or the procedure that you create. So how do you provide such information in the program? Comments. Okay, and when you write some comments and all during the execution of the program, those comments will be ignored, will not be considered as valid line of code. All the comments will be ignored during the execution. Okay, then now I have commented out this. If you see that actually the error is at line number 11, it's the DOB whatever I have written here, and it is throwing. That means it's able to recognize that option explicit now. Option explicit is working. You got what I'm saying here? So whenever you are using, whenever you have written option explicit, then it has to be at the very first line of the valid code. Before option explicit, no statement in the program should be executed. If any statement is executed, then it cannot understand option explicit. Okay? So this point is very important to remember. You got what is meant by option explicit exactly? Okay. Now, again, it's not mandatory to use option explicit because it's a standard when you're defining a program, and the standards are like this. Okay, every variable that whatever we use, every variable must have to be declared before we use it. So that's a standard set. Okay, then so let's come back to the variables now. And yesterday we understood how we can declare the variables. We have various statements available, like dim and public, private. We have seen dim. As I told, public and private, it won't make any much difference here. Even though when I tell you can't see anything different. Okay, anything different. So that's the reason I'm not coming to that public and private for now. But those will be covered in the last session in the when we talk about class objects. Okay, we need to create different class objects probably, and then I will talk about public and private. So that will be more understandable. Okay, if I explain now also, since they won't show any difference to us, then it will be confusing. Okay, why we use them. Then. But the thing what you need to understand is the difference between the dim, public, private and constants. What exactly mean? Okay. Now, let's say for example here I'm using the variable DOB. Okay. I'm just displaying a right variable only here. Now the initial value of DOB, what I have done here, what I have assigned? Date. That means date stands for today's date. It is that function. Date is one of the inbuilt function which we have in VB script, and that date function returns today's date, current system date, not today's date exactly, current system date based on the date which is set in the system. Okay. Then after some point of time, after doing some piece of code, what I'm trying to do is Okay, so you can still give in double quote, no problem. Now what I'm doing here is the DOB variable, the initial value given as current system date, and after doing some lines of code or after executing some lines of code or some transaction, then I'm updating the DOB value to a new value. Then the question is whether my program or this script will allow me to update the variable value in the middle of the program. Initial value is something already given, and will it allow me to update the value of that variable in the middle? Okay, so that means can I update the variable value in the middle of the program? Depends on certain conditions and all. Maybe say for example here I have declared one variable called patient ID. Patient ID is a variable. Then all the patients are there in the database for me, or in the UI in one of the table all the patient IDs are displayed. Then what my criteria, what my transaction is here, I have to take a certain patient ID, then I have to update the medication information of that patient ID, and I need to search for the patient ID whether that is the right patient or not first. Then what I will do is, first I will take the first patient ID in the table, I will assign to the variable patient ID. Whatever the variable, str patient ID is the name of the variable. Whatever the patient ID that I got from the table, I will assign the first value. Then after doing some validation to check whether the patient is right patient or not, I do a lot of validations. I get the personal information of the patient, or the previous treatment information, or date of joining information, everything I will get. And once, after doing all these validations, I realized that this is not the patient I am looking at. Then what I have to do, I need to go to the second patient in the table. Then I have to, instead of declaring one more variable for the second patient, the same patient variable, whatever str patient ID, I will update the value of that same, so that another value will be taken into the program. So that will be looped. So that means the variable whatever I have declared here need to be updated with a different patient. That should not be constant. If I make that as constant, then I can't, whatever the patient ID I have taken initial, the same patient ID should be taken throughout. But in this particular logic or in this particular transaction, that should not be the case, right? So that's the reason what they have done is, when you declare the variable with dim or public or private, then variables are not constant here. You can, variable value can be updated at any moment of the time in the program, depends on the situation, depends on the conditions. Okay, now see what I am doing here. The initial value of DOB is date, and then I am updating after doing some transactions. I am updating, then I am just displaying it, and let's see whether it will consider or it will throw the error. Current system date it is taking, that is at line number 10, and you can see another value, whatever the value that I have given again, that value also considered, no error, but it is accepting the value. At the same time, if you see that, one more thing here, earlier it was a date value, right? Now what I will do, I will change it to Boolean value. So one variable, first time one type of value, second time a different type of value. It's taking. So it's not mandatory that every time you have to assign same type of value. As I told, when the variable is variant, then it will accept any kind of value. For the same variable, first time you assign a string value, or second time you assign a numeric value, third time you assign a date value, any value you can give, because that variable is variant. Okay, now what is my requirement is, what my requirement is here, the value whatever I provide in the beginning, the same value should be carried throughout. So for one execution or for this release, this is only the value for that particular variable. You got what I am saying? So in case if user tries to change the value, updates the value in between the program, my script should not accept it. So what I mean to say here, the value whatever I am giving in the beginning of the program, that value should be the constant throughout the program. So when I say it's a constant, what it has to be, the variable whatever I have given here, DOB, should be constant. No other value or no value, whatever the value that they are giving, again one more time, that should not be accepted. You got what I'm saying? Then how can I make the variable as constant? Then in such cases, what you need to do is, don't declare the variable with dim. Then what we need to do, there is fourth type of declaration I told you, called constant. Now when you are declaring the variable with constant, declaration should happen in a different way, not as like dim. You know what I am doing here? There are two things here whenever you are using the variable. One is declaration, second one is the initiation, we call it as. What is meant by declaration? Declaration is nothing but you are making the registration of the variable so that memory will be created. That's what the declaration means for. The initiation of the variable means the first time when you are assigning the value, right? Assigning the value for first time is called as initiation of the variable. Now when you use dim statement, if you see that declaration happened in one line and initiation happened in a different line. You can also do in the same line but in a different way, but I will come to that part, just wait for some time. But when you are using constant statement or when you are declaring a variable with constant, that should not be like that. You should not declare variable in one line, assign the value in another line. So you have to declare the variable and assign the value in the same line. Both should happen in the same line. That's the difference. Okay, here. Now that's the reason what I am doing is, I am making the variable as constant. Expected literal constant. Can't assign the function value here. That cannot be converted into data. So you cannot assign the inbuilt function value directly. Current system. You can do one thing. You can assign the date to another variable. You can assign the value to this variable. Okay. Now it is taking test, right? Next, what happened here? Line number 16. What is that? Illegal assignment. Line number 16. So you assign a different value there, right? So you are trying to change the value of that variable. Then what it is showing here is illegal assignment. That means the value whatever you are assigning one more time, that is illegal. You cannot assign a new value to that because that value is already assigned to that variable, which is constant again. So this is what the constant statement does exactly. Okay, when you say constant, the value whatever you have given in the beginning, you can assign any value but not through inbuilt function. So why it was thrown the error? Because date, all those are the inbuilt functions which will be changing for every execution. So such kind of inbuilt functions cannot be assigned for constant values directly, constant variables. You got? Right. Okay. Then the things that what you need to remember when you are using this is, when you are using constant, variable should be declared and assigned in the same line mandatorily. If you do this like a dim, let's see what happens. As like dim, earlier I used the dim in the same way, right? But I just, instead of dim, I am using constant. Declaration in one line and initiation in another line. Let's see what happens. What it is saying here, expected equal to line number 7. Line number 7 means wherever I have declared here. Expected equal to means what it is? Initiation. Right? So it is expecting the initiation at the same line wherever you have declared it. So you can't declare in one line and initiate in another line. Okay, that cannot be done. And by using dim, that is fine. You can do. But in case if you ask me saying that, okay, can I do in the same way for dim also, declaration and initiation in the same line? Yes, that can be done, but in a different way, not just like, constant. So what you need to do is, how you can make the declaration and initiation in the same line. Say dim DOB variable declaration and have a colon as a separator here. Colon, and then you have to say variable equals to like this. Declaration of the variable, colon, variable equals to the value. That's how we can do the declaration and initiation in the same line. But we don't do like this in the real. But in case if somebody asks you, how can you make the declaration and initiation in the same line when you are using public or when you are using private or when you are using dim? Then this is the way. Dim, a variable, colon, then the same variable name equals to another value. Okay, fine. We will be seeing more variables coming forward almost in every program that we write. Using the variable is a necessary activity. So we are getting more and more variables going forward. Okay, first, instead of discussing about different variables, let's understand about some standards that need to be followed when you are using the variables and all. The first thing is in the standards, naming conventions. Naming. What is meant by naming convention? Here, the namings of the variables. What names you provide for the variables. Then, when it comes to the names, variable name can be minimum one character length. That means, like generally we use a equals to 10, b equals to 20, x, y, like this, some variables. So that is one line character. Sorry, one character length. Oh, those are the variables that we use. So a variable name can be minimum one character length, and maximum can be 255 character length. A name. Okay, but the value inside the variable you can assign n number. It's not like there is no limit that only these many characters of value you can assign. A value can be n number of characters. It can be a complete paragraph or complete. Generally, sometimes what we do is, when we have a file, we will read the entire text from the file, and the entire text of the file can be assigned to a single variable, like that. So there is no limit for the value, but for the name, it is 255 character length, name of the variable, the maximum. And a variable can be alpha character allowed. That means like ABCD, all the alpha characters. If you look at the DOB here, that is only alpha, no numerics are there. Or a variable name can be alpha numeric. That means you can say if multiple variables are there, DOB1, DOB2, DOB3, or user1, user2, user3, like this. Okay, a variable name can be alpha numeric. At the same time, you can use underscore as a separator in the name. Now let's say, for example, I have username, or say for example first user. I can say like this, first user, or in the same way I can also say like this, first user. Underscore is a separator. When you have two words in the same name, then you can use underscore as a separator. Only underscore can be separator. No other character is allowed as a separator. No dot should be placed, or no at, no space, no other characters will be allowed in between the variable names. Only underscore will be allowed. Okay, remember these points. Then line number 9, what it says, expected identifier. So this means that, see, I said a variable can be alphanumeric, right? What I have used alphanumeric there, but it should not start with a numeric character. It's alphanumeric, But a variable name should not start with a numeric character, and it has to start with alpha character, then you can place numerics. Okay, so when it is alphanumeric, it doesn't mean that I can place the numeric at any place. It has to start with alpha character only, then followed by numeric values. Okay, then these are the mandatory things that we must have to follow. Apart from this, we define some standards in the variables. The standards are like this. Whenever you define a name of the variable, whenever you give the name of the variable, make sure that the name of the variable is self-descriptive. What does it mean, self-descriptive? If somebody looks at the name of the variable, you use a lot of variables, you can't provide the information of each and every variable. That means we don't add the comment for every single variable that we use. But if a person looks at the variables that what you have used, when you look at a variable that what you have declared there, a person should be able to understand why you are using the variable and what that variable is exactly, what is the purpose. So what I mean to say here is, the purpose of the variable should be understandable by any user just by looking at the name of the variable. So what we need to do is, whenever some people do like this, whenever they declare the variables, right, they will just simply say A, B, C, or they will just simply say var1, var2, like they give some names. Okay, while writing the program, fine. That is, you can continue with your program. But after 1 month, if you look at revisit your code, if somewhere the script is being failed, when you revisit your code, you will only frustrated by looking at those names, because those names cannot be understandable. Then you can't understand so easily why that program is written, what those variables are doing and all. So for time being you have written, but once you come back to your own script, then you can't understand why these variables are used. Look, then consider a different person is debugging your code, or consider different person, because nobody can expect to be there or lifelong in the same project, right? So you joined in a project, you are writing the programs, but you can't expect that you will be there throughout, right? So then later you got a better opportunity, or your activity is done here, then you will be moving to a different project within the organization. So it happens like that. So if a different person comes into your place, and then they try to sort out the problems, and then it will be difficult. As I told yesterday, there will be 80% of the work will go for maintenance. That's a fact. Nearly 20 to 25% only we do the actual coding. Remaining part generally we spend on maintenance, like debugging or the execution, all those. In such cases, if you follow the namings like this ABC or XYZ, something like that, then people will be screwed in the debugging. Unnecessarily they have to spend a lot of time. So that's the reason what you need to do is, whenever you provide the names or whenever you declare the variable, give a meaningful name. Okay, depends on the purpose. Variable name should be given. Okay, where that variable will be used and what kind of value that will be assigned to the variable, the purpose of the variable, and name should explain all this. Now let's say, for example, okay, so here I said DOB. Nobody need to tell that why I'm using that variable here. By looking at the variable name, people can easily understand, yeah, date of birth, that variable is used for date of birth. Instead of DOB, if I just say it as X, while explaining you can understand. Later when I share the program offline, if you are not there, then what is that X? People can't understand. Another standard. Not only while writing the program in the real, but even when you attend for interviews also, then when you are writing, in some interviews and all, they may give one sample scenario for you, and they may ask you to write the program. And if in such cases, right, then more than the logic, more than the logic that what you have written there, people look at the standards that what you have followed. Okay, because when a person really worked in a right environment, then obviously he will follow the right approach to write the program, right? So the standards, whenever you're writing, that gives the impression. But when you use junk variables under a lot of unnecessary questions, cross questions, okay, why this x is written, why this y is written, what this does exactly. Okay, so make sure this becomes as a habit for you. Okay, then second standard that you need to follow is, one is variable. Before coming to the second standard, I will tell you one thing here. That's called scope of the variable. Scope of the variable. What is meant by scope of the variable here is the lifetime of the variable. Scope defines the lifetime of the variable or the access level of the variable, where those variables can be accessed and how long those variables will be alive in the program. What is the duration? That's what the scope means for exactly. Then there are two types of scopes everywhere in any program, in any language. There are two types of scope. One is global, second one is local. One is global and second one is local. Okay. Then what exactly meant by this global and local is, when I make a variable as global, that variable can be used in throughout the program in any procedure. We may write a lot of functions and procedures going forward. So when you make a variable as global, then you can use that variable. The variable which I have used or which I have declared in the beginning, I can use it in procedure A. And if I update the value in procedure A, the updated value can be taken into procedure B if I use the same variable, and also into procedure C, D, like a number of procedures you have written, but within the same program. That's what the global means for. But when you declare a variable as local, then that variable will be alive or will be used within the same procedure. Once the procedure is executed, completed, then the variable will be dead. If we use the same variable in other procedure, that will be considered as a new variable, not the same variable which I have used in previous procedure. Now let's say I will just take an example here. Okay, so assume this is one procedure for me. I mean, each block of code, consider that. This is another block of code. Or this could be another block of code for me. Like this, or like this multiple block of codes. Each block is nothing but a procedure or a function. Okay, I'm just creating the blocks there. Now, what I mean to say here is, now let's say for example here, I have declared a variable in this block, div A. Now when I declare the variable inside this block, that variable will be used or can be used within that block, wherever I have declared. I cannot use the same A here. Now if I use A here, there is no relation between this A and this A. This is one local variable which is for this block. This is another local variable, this for another block. No relation here. Okay? So these two are two different local variables. Got what I am saying? Then if you want to say like, both are same A only. Now the variable which I am using in first block, the same variable I want to use in block 2 and third block. then in such cases what you need to do is, instead of declaring this here inside one block, what I am doing there, I am declaring the variable outside those blocks. When you declare the variable outside the blocks, then the same way, now if I use the variable here, this A, one minute, it's the same A. Okay, so whatever I have used here, then this is also same A, same variable is being used everywhere. That's a global. Now one thing is here, when you use global variable, right, assume that I have called first block. Now I have executed first block. In the first block I have updated the value of that global variable. Now what I am doing is, in the second block I am displaying, which will be the value. Whatever the value I have updated in first block, the same value will be carried to second block also. The reason, because it's a global. When you make a variable as global, then the changes whatever you are making to that variable, no matter where you are outside the block or inside the block, or that means consider the block is nothing but a procedure here or a function. So you are doing inside the function or outside the function, since that is a global variable, then the changes will be automatically reflected on the variable. In the first block of code, in the first procedure, I updated the value of the global variable. Then when I use the same global variable in another procedure, then whatever the change I made in the first procedure, that change will be carried to the second one. That's the scope of the global. So now the lifetime of the global variable is throughout the execution, entire procedure, entire script. Now what I am doing is here, what I have done, I declared one more variable with the same name inside the procedure. What it makes now? Two variables here with the same name. But if you see the declaration where I have declared is in two different places. This is valid actually. Within the scope, you cannot declare two variables with the same name. Now let's say, for example, outside I have already declared dim A, right? I cannot declare one more variable, either with constant statement, public or private or dim, whatever it is, but I can't declare the same variable, I can't declare another variable with the same name. Now this is invalid. Within the scope, either global or local, I can't have the same name for two variables. But this is valid. Scope is different here. I have the same name, but one is global and another one is local. Okay? So one variable, variable A, I declared outside the procedure. That means it's global. Same variable I have declared inside the procedure also, but that is local. So that is acceptable, that is valid here. You can declare the variable with the same name in different scope, not in the same scope. I cannot make the same variable inside the same procedure. I can't do that. Okay? But what I can do is here, this is valid again, because scope is different here. Even the scope is local, but in a different procedure. Got what I am saying here? Then, when you use like this, I have a global variable here, I have a local variable with the same name. I am assigning the variable to the, I am assigning the value to the variable. Now, the question is, to which variable that value is assigned? Is it for the global which I have declared, or is it the local which I have declared? It is for local. Whenever you declared any local variable, the procedure directly refers to the local variable only, not to the global variable. Now, I'm assigning the value to the A here. I didn't see the local variable that somebody declared that local variable. What I thought is, I looked at only global variable. And I directly assigned the value. Then I'm trying to use the same variable here in the next procedure. What will be the output in the next procedure? Empty. It is empty. The reason why it is empty, because this value is given to the local, right? What is the lifetime of the local, or what is the scope of the local? Within this procedure only. Once I come out of this procedure, then the value whatever I have assigned to that variable will be eliminated. That means that variable will be dead, local variable. Then if I use this, since I have not declared the variable inside this, then it will prefer to the global, not to this local. So inside this procedure, the value is assigned to the local, right? And global values remain empty only. So that's the reason in the second procedure, the value becomes empty. People do this kind of mistakes. Many people. Even though that is allowing, but what happens is, many people, since it allows, generally when we define the framework or when we define the approach and all, when we start the programming and all, we define some global variables. Also for time being, some people what they do is, they define some variables in each and every individual procedure or individual piece of code. Then since they want to use some variables, they declare the same variables there, some variables in the program. Then while declaring the variable, they may provide the same name, whatever the name that I have given for global variable, same name they will provide same name they will provide inside the procedure also for one of the variable. Then they will try to assign the value for that procedure. Script will not throw you any error because the scope is changed here. One variable is there in the global, but here he is giving a different name. He is giving the same name but in a different place. He is creating a local variable. Then he tried to assign the value. Then they are trying to use the same variable in another procedure. Then in another procedure, the value whatever they have given in the first procedure was not coming into second one. Then they start confusing or they start questioning. No, I declared the variable, I declared it as global. Okay, so you will understand much better when we talk about tool. Okay, so there are something called actions and external libraries we'll be having. The variables which you declare in external library outside all the procedures will be considered as global. There is something called action blocks we will be having in the tool. Each action block is nothing but one kind of procedure, and if you declare the variable inside the action block, those variables can be used within that action. Like this, we use multiple actions in the test or in a scenario. Okay, so now what people do is, they will define the variable directly inside one action. They will try to use that variable in another action. Those won't be, you cannot use like this, because the variable which is defined inside one action block, that variable is only for that particular action block. That means local to that action. So the changes whatever you make to that variable within that action only, similar to this. So what people do mistake is, they will define the variable inside the block, then they will try to use the variable, same variable, or why they are trying to use the same variable there? Because they want to pass the value from here to there. Cannot happen. The reason why? Because the value is being assigned to the local. So the standard what you need to follow here is, even though it is allowing a global variable and a local variable with the same name, but never do this. The reason, because it leads to a lot of confusion. Because when we are generating some values in one procedure, sometimes it is expected that the same values need to be used in different place or in a different procedure. But when you declare a variable inside the procedure and assign the value, then the value will be dead, or that value will be cleared within the procedure only. You can't take the value into next procedure. So that's the reason what you do is, whenever some variables are declared as global, remember those global variables and make sure that you are not giving the same name to the local variables. Getting what I'm saying here? So very important thing. This is another standard that you must have to follow. Even though it is allowing for you to use one local and one global with the same name, but never use in that way. That leads to a lot of confusion. Okay? Then, so one standard is follow the appropriate naming conventions. Second one is never duplicate the variable name even though the scope is different, global and local. Right? Yeah. How? That comes by experience. So because when we are writing the program, we know the situation and we know why you are using that variable, right? Now let's say for example, I am using a variable to be assigned for first name or the first name. Then you say the first name is a variable. Then what kind of value that we need to assign for that variable? String value, right? First name. Say str first name. When you are assigning, it depends on for which field you are using, or depends on the context variable name will be set. So when we think about more scenarios, this is too beginning for us to understand, or this is too early for us to understand about the situations or the scenarios. That will come slowly. You have to be experienced to judge how I can provide a variable name. So once you look at, or once you experience with the different scenarios or different situations, obviously you will come to know. Okay? Fine. Then, so this is what about the variable. We are not yet done. Still, there is something pending in variable. But did you understand the concept of the variable? Fine. Now, next thing that what you need to understand is types of variables. Types of variables. Then so far we just understood that the variable is used whenever the value is changed, or the variable is just a memory where we can assign some value and that memory can be used wherever we need. Okay. Next is types of variables. Then in any language that whatever we have, there are two types of variables will be there everywhere. What are those two types? One is a scalar variable, we call it as SCALAR. SCALAR. One is a scalar variable and the second one is array variable, we call it as array. Scalar variable and array variable. Then what makes difference between these two? Okay, now consider, we'll take a real scenario. Assume this is just an institute. Now probably I need to interact with each and every individual. So what I need to do is, I need to store each and every person in a variable so that I can use it whenever I want, or I can call whenever I need. Now, assume there are maybe 20 people here or 15 people here. So I can declare 15 variables. I can assign 15. Each person will be into one variable, individual. Fine. So whenever I need, I can say first person, second person, like that I can do. Now, not only with your batch, probably I need to interact with all the people in all the batches. There are maybe 60 to 70 people are there. So I need to declare 70 variables. Number may go bigger even. Maybe 200 people are there. I need to declare 200. Number may go even bigger. I need to declare some more variables. But is it a right thing to do? To declare this many variables? Probably no, because if the count is going keep increasing, then I need to keep increasing the variable declaration. And it will be difficult for me to understand all the variables there. Instead of doing that, what I can do is, I need to declare a variable instead of storing a single, which can store, instead of a variable which can store a single value, I will categorize all the people into batch wise, batch 1, batch 2, batch 3, batch 4, batch 5, like that. Then what I will do here, instead of assigning one person in one variable, entire batch will be assigned to one variable, the collection of people here. Right? Then for first batch, one variable, second batch, another variable, third batch, another variable. So I will declare the variable by batch wise. Then first batch people, I will keep it in batch 1, second batch people, I will keep it in batch 2. Then when I want to use any value or when I want to call any person, I will say second person from batch 1 or third person from batch 1. So what I am doing here, this is well categorized, not using the individual variables. So what I am trying to do here is, instead of assigning an individual value or an individual person to one variable, I am trying to assign as a collection, one collection to one variable. This is called array. The first one, individual one, is called as a scalar. So here, whatever we have used, that's a scalar variable. A scalar variable allows only one value at a time, even though it is a dynamic. When you make it as dim, value is dynamic, but only one value at a time. Only the latest value is being taken. Right? Only the latest value is being taken. But when you use array variable, then array is used to store the collection of values. Instead of storing one value, array is used to store the collection of values. Okay? Now, again, array is two types. Variable is two types. Array is two types. Okay, now let's come back again to the same example here. Set batch. Now, whenever I am using an array, right, I cannot directly store the values into an array. First, I need to define the size of that array. How many values that I am going to keep inside that. Okay. Now let's say, for example, here when you come inside, assume this room is one array. I can't directly keep and I cannot directly ask you to go and sit in the room. What I need to do is, first, okay, there are 10 people. I need to make that arrangement. Probably 10 chairs I need to keep. Then I can say first chair, second chair, third chair. This is called as an indexing in the array. So whenever I have certain set of values that need to be assigned in an array, I need to specify the size of array. Each value will be assigned to an index. As I told chair here, nothing but the index that we use, index numbers in the array. Index numbers generally starts with 0, always. So when I want to store 10 values in an array, I have to say 9 index there. Maximum index is 9. So 0 to 9. So each value will be assigned to a specific index number. Getting what I am saying here? So whenever I declare an array, first I have to specify. Say, yeah, this many values I am going to store here. So keep, this is the maximum index number for this array. So that I can assign these many values. In case if the values are less, some chairs can be empty, no problem. Similarly, some index numbers can be empty there. There is no issue. Now, okay, there are 10 people. Assume that initially I started with 10 people. But if you see, some in the middle of the batch or some people may get joined. But if I restrict to only 10 chairs there, can I keep new people into this, or new people can fit into this? No. Then what I have to do here? That size should not be fixed. Whenever the new people joins, then obviously I need to increase the chairs. You got what I'm saying here? So that means the size has to be dynamic. Whenever the new values comes, then the size has to be increased. I should be able to increase. Whenever the size is decreased, then I should be able to decrease. This is called dynamic. So when you say fixed size array here, fixed size array to dynamic array, the main difference is when I say fixed size array, then the size of the array will be fixed. Whatever the size that I define while declaring it, the same size will be continued throughout and you will not be able to change in between. When I say 10 values, the maximum you can store only 10 values in the array. But in certain situations, value collection may not be same. Size will be keep changing. Now let's say for example, take a Google search. Okay, so my scenario is search here. Then I will enter the keyword. Keyword will be changing every time. Okay, so when I enter one keyword, it returns the result. Some result it will return. Then what I need to do is I need to store all the result in a array. All this collection of the result I need to store it in one array. First time assume that there are 30 or 40 results I have returned with that keyword. Next time I change the keyword, the same, I am executing with another set of data and I changed the keyword. Can you say the same amount of values will be returned? No. This time earlier it was 40, this time it may be 45 or 55, I don't know, 60, like that. Or it may be even more, or it could be little less. But when I specify the array size as fixed, earlier it was 40, so I will give it as 39 maximum index size, so that I can store 40 values. But this time I cannot store all the values, right? This time it returns 60. So what I have to do now, instead of specifying the index size, say only 39 or 40, something like that, then what I do, the size has to be automatically updated, the maximum size should be automatically updated based on the collection of values that I have got. So the size should be updated accordingly. I should be able to change the size whenever the collection size is increased. I should be able to decrease the size of an array whenever the collection size is decreased. Good. This is called dynamic array. Fixed size means the size is fixed. Okay, when I say 30 values, only 30 values. If 31st value has come, then you are not allowed. Use one more variable. But when I say dynamic array, initially 30 values are there. Okay, keep them. And there are 10 more values have come. Then you don't need to define one more variable. As soon as you find that the collection size is increased, there itself you say, okay, you can increase the size. And then you can store the values into that. So like this you can do a number of times. Whenever the collection is increased, I'm keep executing the program, collection size is keep increasing, then I can keep increase the size of the array whenever I need. Okay? You can do decrease also. You can do both. Okay? So this is the difference between a fixed size array. We have to see, we will see them. No issue. Okay? So no need to worry about that. We'll see that. And one more thing that we need to understand is in the array something called dimensions. Okay, dimension. What exactly meant by this dimension is, when I say Google search, it's only one collection of value. Now let's take we will take a different example this time. Just go back with the institute and batches that what we discussed. Earlier, what I have done is here, I have 5 batches, just consider that. I have declared 5 variables, 5 arrays, batch 1, batch 2, batch 3, batch 4. In each batch, one collection of values I can store. So that means each batch is single dimension. One collection is nothing but one dimension. But now, instead of declaring 5 different arrays, I want to declare only one array for install. And then I want to store all 5 collections. I have to categorize it into 5 collections. So what I should do here? I can't store, if I keep in one dimension, all the values will be one dimension only. Again, that will be difficult for me to categorize. You got what I'm saying here? Then in this case, what you need to do is, for the same array, what I will do, I will create 5 dimensions. Dimension 1, dimension 2, dimension 3, dimension 4 and dimension 5. First collection, I will keep it in one dimension. Second collection, I will store it in second dimension. Third collection, I will keep it in third dimension. So like this. You got what I am saying? So that depends on how many collections of values that you want to store it in an array. Then you create, each collection of values will become one dimension. Let's take one more example. Now I have a scenario where the data, whatever is written in the database, the data has to be retrieved into an array for me. Then how the data will be returned in the database? In the form of table. In the form of table, right? Rows and columns. Now rows is one dimension for me, columns is another dimension for me. So that is 2-dimensional. Here it's 5-dimensional to store 5 collections. So like this, an array can be a single dimensional or an array can be multi-dimensional. You can store not only just one collection of values, you can store multiple collection of values in one array by keeping multiple dimensions. Getting what I am saying here? Very important to understand because we have to use all of them going forward. So like this, an array, I told 5 dimensions, right? Like this you can have 60 dimensions in an array, maximum, 60. So like this, I can have 60 maximum dimensions. Minimum 1 dimension array, maximum array can be 60 dimensions, 60. Okay? So we'll stop here today and tomorrow we'll talk more about arrays. Okay, so tomorrow completely dedicated to arrays. And one more thing before we start. I told about comments, right? We do the commenting. Okay? So tomorrow alone we will discuss about arrays. Before we stop the session, we'll discuss about something called commenting. Okay? So here, if you see that whatever is highlighted in green, that's a commented line. Okay? How did I comment that line? If you see that single quote, that's how we do the commenting. In VB script, single quote, if you add a single quote, then that will be treated as a commented line. Single quote outside the double quotes, remember that. I mean to say here, if you keep that single quote within the double quote again, that will be considered as a value. So that single quote should be outside the double quote. That's how you do the commenting. There is no multi-line commenting in VB script. What I mean to say here is multi-line commenting. In other language, what you can do is whatever the lines of code that you write in between, then all the lines will be commented automatically. So in other languages, you have the multi-line commenting like this, but in VB script, you don't have multi-line commenting. Every individual line has to be commented. That means if you want to comment 10 lines of code, then you have to add single quote for every line. Okay? And there is one more way of commenting the line. The another way of commenting the line is there is a statement called REM. In VB script, the statement name is REM. So this statement is used to comment a single line. So either you add a single quote or add REM. Okay? The difference between these two is when you say REM, then that has to be in the beginning of the statement or the beginning of the line, not the statement, beginning of the line, REM must be. But when you say single quote, right, you can use it for commenting entire line, or now let's say, okay, this is a valid statement, right? After the statement, I need to write a comment. You can do that. So that means some part of the line, if you want to comment, you can keep the single quote. So from the single quote, the remaining line will be considered as a comment. So by using single quote, you can make, or you can make entire line as comment, or you can make half of the line as comment also. Whereas REM is for entire line commenting. You cannot use REM in between the line. Okay? So if you see here, if you see that REM, it's not commenting. If it is commented, then it would have highlighted in green, or the font should have been changed to green. Okay? So this is how generally you make the comments in the VB script. So whenever you make any, anything as a comment, that means whatever the comments that you have used, that those comments are only for the information, to provide the information. Okay? And those comments will be ignored during execution. And using too many comments also not a standard, because some people what they do is for every individual block of code or every conditional statement they will write too much of information. That maybe when you go through the comments and all, it looks, user can understand, but when you look at the code looks exhaustive when you add more comments. Now see, I have written these many lines. For this, I will add 2 comments. For another line, I will add 2 comments. Some people do that. They will provide too much of information. Providing the information is right. It's a good thing. But when you provide too many comments, when you write too many comments and all, right, then more than the valid lines of code, comments will become more. Unnecessarily, the lines of code will be increased. And the script looks exhaustive. If you look at the code, only comments will be appeared. So that's not a right thing. Just give a single line or maximum 2 lines commenting for it. Not for every individual line, for one block. Generally, whenever you write one loop, right, just beginning of the loop, right, loop is for so and so. Whenever you create a function is for so and so. Or whenever you create whenever you write a conditional statement, so condition does so and so. That's it. Okay? So to provide such kind of information, we use the comments. Using the comments is a mandatory thing, because you have to make your script understandable by everybody, so that you need to provide the information, but too much information, again, not a good thing. Okay? So we will stop here today. Tomorrow we will start with arrays. I will explain how we can use the arrays and all. Then we will also start with the functions, inbuilt functions. Clear?